Welcome to the Dojo series on the UpRev Ninja podcast. In this series, I do a deep dive on a particular subject with my guest that come from audience suggestions. If you're interested in learning more about the topic, please do so, as this is only one person's opinion.
So today on episode 16, we're doing a deep dive in neuro-linguistic programming with Rick Schnabel. Rick was with us on episode 15 where we discussed modeling courage. Well, today we're doing a deep dive in NLP, and Rick's going to take us through the journey, and we're going to learn a lot more about this topic. I'm really excited about this.
Hey, welcome to UpRev Ninja. So this is a special bonus episode. This is going to be something I'm going to start doing in regards to tips and tricks that we kind of hear throughout the podcast. And so today I've got Rick Schnabel back with us, and he was a former guest on the show a while back, and I'll reference what show that is in the show notes. But Rick's going to give us a primer on NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. This has come up half of the shows, I think, and we never touch on what it is. And I asked Rick to come on and just kind of do a deep dive with us and explain to us what it is, how do we get involved, what to look for, and show us it's not a lot of BS and snake oil. So welcome to the show, Rick.
Hey Tom, welcome. Thank you,
dude. I'm super excited about this because I honestly, we've talked for 10, 15 minutes before the show started, but we didn't talk about what we're covering today. So I'm excited just because I know we're talking about NLP. I have no clue where this is going to take us, and I think that's what I'm most excited about.
Cool, me too.
Well, like I said, when we last talked, which was a whole 24 hours ago, what is NLP?
Okay, what I feel to do is to keep this as simple as possible, but then dive in deeper. So everyone listening really, at the end of this, knows exactly what NLP actually is. So firstly, I'll start off with expanding on the acronym NLP. Most people do know this, that neuro means the mind, essentially. Linguistic is our language and the value that our language has in helping us to shape our thinking. So the P stands for programming, which essentially refers to the ability to utilize our language and the things that we learn in NLP to reprogram the way we think. So after teaching NLP since 2004, my simplest description of NLP is it's modeling excellence. So when we learn NLP, we now have the tools, we have the insights, we have the systems and the methodology to model literally any human behavior. So we achieve this aim by mastering the beliefs, the physiology, the psychology, or the specific thought processes that really underlie the skill or behavior of literally anything. So we actually call this a strategy in NLP. And it's about achieving an outcome by studying how someone else goes about it. So we model the external steps, the things that we can actually see someone doing, and the internal psychology. Now, this is where NLP really gets quite interesting, because many of us will, model someone's behavior where we're watching what they're doing, but what we don't know is how they're thinking about doing the thing before they actually do it. And so a lot of people really model at the wrong end. They're actually modeling after the thought pattern. It's the thought patterns that determine how we do things. So let me dive in a little bit deeper, to get a sense of this. So once we know how to model, we can literally model absolutely anything. So this starts to make sense why people improve their health, their wealth, their relationships, their career, or their business. In fact, you can improve any area of your life. This is why there are so many definitions for NLP. And of course, this is why it can get confusing, because you usually come into the training with specific outcomes, things that you personally want to achieve from it. So when you ask someone, what is NLP, particularly, let's say, someone who's increased their earning capacity, for example, they might say that NLP stands for no longer poor.
Okay. I like that.
That was my model of the world, because that's what I went into NLP to do, because, I could not get beyond that 6-figure threshold. I could not get to that area, and I knew it had something to do with my thinking. However, if you ask someone who used NLP to move out of the blame game, for example, they might say that NLP stands for no longer precious, because that's what they did. They went in because they realized that they were blaming everyone for their non-results. And as a result of that, they went into NLP, learned how to change their thinking around that. And, of course, they were no longer precious. But some people learn NLP because they want to improve their career, others for their business, others for their relationships. And some people just generally want to improve, many aspects of their lives. For me personally, I learned it because I was sick and tired of being poor. I mentioned in the previous show that we were on that, my parents thought that they were the poorest family in Melbourne, Australia, which I actually thought was a limitation. They should have said, we're the poorest family in the world, but they obviously lacked that aspiration. So I learned to dramatically improve my income. And once I learned how to do that, then naturally I wanted to show other people how to do the same. And that's what I love so much about NLP. And I've seen a lot of our students, for example, that come through our programs, that they come through, they learn how to get rid of things. And and some of them get so excited about that they can't shut up about it. And they want to share it with so many other people and they end up teaching other people how to get over the problem that they used to have. So, I also studied to become a life coach, prior to learning NLP. So it certainly made sense to me to use NLP in my coaching. And in my view, NLP brings magic to your coaching. It's kind of like coaching on steroids. All of a sudden, instead of working for weeks or months to help my clients achieve a specific outcome, my clients experience changes in a couple of weeks, sometimes within the hour. And actually, this is really going to help us to understand modeling, because I recall one particular client who came to see me for depression. So he told me that he'd been seeing a therapist for 6 years and he was medicated for 4 of those years. And I asked him if he wanted to get rid of his depression today. And his first response was to ask me if I'd heard him.
Right, right.
So he repeated again, they've been seeing a therapist for 6 years and medicated for 4. And I said to him, look, if you're willing to change your beliefs around how long you think it'll take to remove depression, then let's give it our best shot to remove it today. And we did. So the thing that happened was that I had to work out how he was modeling depression. So, and this is going to, again, go another layer deeper. So let's learn a little bit about modeling, because NLP teaches us how to model excellence, but we can also use it to model a less than excellent result, depression, for example. So I asked my client, how do you do depression? Teach it to me. And I said, but go very slowly. We're going to go very slowly. And let's go right down to every thought and every micro movement. Now, this was specifically how he did depression. So after 20 minutes, we broke it down to just 4 specific things. So his depression started with a trigger, which I could summarize as a belief that I'm unlucky. So any time, anything that proved to him that he was unlucky, that would trigger his depression. So that was just a trigger.
And that's like confirmation bias too, right? Because you start to look for those things.
Exactly. And this is a huge insight that I learned through NLP, and that is that our model of the world is as unique as our thumbprint.
Right.
So how we think the world is how the world shows up to us, because none of us like to be wrong, right? We all want to be so right about the world, so we will actually defend our own limitations. I think it was actually, was it George Harrison who said, it was Richard Bach. He said, argue for your limitations and you get to keep them.
Right, yeah.
And so what happened, these 4 specific things that happened was, first of all, when the trigger went off, when he experienced something, he told me that he would see a black cloud which appeared right in front of him. And I asked specifically, what does that black cloud look like? Is it is it a cumulus nimbus, or, what sort of cloud? And he said, yeah. He said, it's like a cumulus nimbus, but he said, it's right in front of me. And I said, how far away from you? And he told me very specifically it was within about 15 centimeters, within about 6 or 7 inches.
Right.
And so what happened was it was very specific to him. So I said, okay, what happens next? I said, let's slow your mind right down. After you see the cloud, what happens next? And I can recall he really had to think about this. And I said, take your time, because we want to get this absolutely right. Now, let me share a little NLP insight. What you also do through this process is you say to your client, I want to get this right. I don't want to forget it.
Right.
I want to get it right. I don't want to forget it. Now, NLP teaches you how the brain works. Now, the brain cannot get a knot. It actually has to, it can't make a knot. It can only make a something. So, for example, if I said to you right now, I'm going to say something, and please don't get a picture of it in your mind. Right. Don't even think about it. Don't even let the word, come up in your thoughts at all. Don't even hear the word. So what I'm going to say is, whatever you do, think of a blue, fluffy bunny. Do not think of a blue, fluffy bunny. Just if you're getting any pictures of the blue, fluffy bunny, let it go. So isn't it funny? But for most people, the brain will create a bunny and then make it blue, or instantly create a blue fluffy bunny.
Right.
Even though you're saying don't. It's like with children when you say don't touch the paint. The first thing they do is they walk over and they've just got to touch the paint.
Absolutely.
Because they don't hear the word don't, can't, won't, not. So the way the brain works is, it's like, please don't cry. Please don't cry.
Right.
So typically what happens is, we've got to get very specific. So when we say to our clients, as we're doing this process, to what we're essentially doing is collapsing their pattern and their program, we're saying, I want to get this right, which the brain will hear. I want to get this right. Don't forget it, because we don't want to forget it. So what you're telling the person is forget it, forget it. So as we go through this process, the client, as they give us the details, and I haven't given you all the details yet, but once I finish them, my job is to keep repeating that sentence. And what happens is the client starts to forget it. And then you question your client. You purposely get their steps wrong. And then you keep saying, because we want to get this right, we don't want to forget it. So I'll run through the process with you so you fully understand how we're going, because I kind of jumped in a bit there. So he saw the black cloud. He then placed his head in his left hand, not his right hand, which was really interesting. He said it didn't work when I placed my head in my right hand, but it works when I place my head in my left hand. So he kind of cupped his hand and he placed his head in the hand. And then I said, what happens next? And he said, then I move my head from side to side in my hand, kind of like, shaking his head, but in his hand.
Yeah.
And then the final step was that he would swear in his head. So I won't share his specific words.
Okay.
But he swore, and he said these specific words, and he would do this pattern over and over again. And it would guarantee, voila, the depression cycle would recommence, and he then would lay on the sofa or go to bed. So this was his pattern. And by the way, the reason he came to see me was because this pattern meant that he didn't open his envelopes from the letters that he received, including bills. His wife had a car accident and she was okay, but the car was written off. And one of those bills was a renewal for insurance. And so he didn't open it, so he didn't pay it. And so they lost their car completely.
Oh, no.
So that's why he came to see me, because his problem got to such a degree that, he couldn't, it was costing him a fortune.
Right.
So if we see that what we've got is we've got some elements, 1 to 4. And the first was, it was a visual trigger. So, he saw the black cloud. So all I said to him is so you see this black cloud, and as you look through this black cloud, every cloud has a silver lining. And I want you to begin to look deeper into the cloud, and I want you to start seeing the silver lining. And he stared into space for a while until he said, actually, it's changed. I can see the silver lining. There is a silver lining. I said, now go beyond that. And so what I did is I went through each of the steps and I broke them. I said, sometimes I said things that were ridiculous,
right,
or crazy or funny. And he kept looking at me going, what are you doing? And I said, oh, sorry, we really want to get this right. We don't want to forget it, don't we? And he'd just keep looking at me. And then finally, when I felt like it actually got to the point that something had shifted, I said, so what was the very first step? And he said, it's kind of like this silver-lined cloud. And I said, that's not right. That's not what it is.
Right.
And he said, yes, it is. And it was almost like he was ready to argue with me. And I said, no, that's not how you do it. I said, okay, let's go to the next step. And I said, what's the next step? And he said, I can't remember. And I said, so you've forgotten that you've forgotten.
Right.
And he said, yeah, I can't remember the next step. So then the next part of the process is that you kind of take them down this rabbit hole of thinking until they get so confused that they've got no idea what is going on. And what happens is the client begins to lose their grip of this concept. In this case, it was depression. And I can remember with this gentleman, we did a little bit of work after this, and he was my very last client for the day. And so we got to the end of the session, and I said, so how do you feel? And he said, I don't know. He said, I can't put words to this. He said, I feel so different. I said, awesome. And he said, so what do I do now? And I said, well, now you create a new life. You get on with it. And he said, but I'm not sure how to do that. And I said, okay, so let's do some work about planning how you do this. And so I got him to close his eyes, and I got him to start imagining what his world would be like, completely happy, satisfied, joyful. And it took him a while to kind of work it out. And there's a saying I have, and that is that if you can't see it, you can't have it. So when people get into patterns and problems, typically what happens is they can't see life without the pattern or the problem. So what we've got to do as coaches is we've got to help them to collapse their pattern and their problem, but the job is only half done, because what we now have to do is help a person to now start to create a new reality. So I did that with him, and this guy got so excited. I said to him, look, I'll call you in 24 hours or thereabouts. I'll call you during business hours, of course. But I said to him, just be okay with being a bit confused right now, but understand that it's now time to make up your new life and design it. So you've got to purposefully, consciously design it, because you've been out of this pattern for quite some time, 6 years, in fact. So I said to him, I'll call you, and then, just to check in with you and make sure that you're good. And I remember calling him, and he said, oh my God, this is so weird. He said, it's so weird. I've got a piece of paper in front of me, and I'm trying to write you a thank you note, but I've got no idea what to put on this piece of paper. And I said, it's really simple, 2 words, thank you.
Right.
And he said, cool. I said, done. Excellent. So I said, thank you for the thank you note. You don't even have to post it. And he said, wow. He said, it is so different. And I said, of course it is. I said, you've been in this depressive pattern for 6 years. Of course it's going to be different. But different's not bad. Different is just different. It's not, like a lot of people say, change is pain. Change is uncomfortable. No, it's not. Change is just change. It's just different.
Right.
And it's our ability to accept difference, and it's our ability to be able to manufacture a new world is where, NLP comes into its own. And this gentleman, he came to see me for a lot of other issues. He said, oh my God, if you can fix that, you can also fix this and fix that and fix this. So I did a whole bunch of things with him, and he was in sales. And he had cold calling reluctance. So his biggest driver for his business was to get on the phone and make cold calls. And that was the thing that he hated most. So I said to him, can you bring your telephone into the session? And he said, what? I said,
that's fear right there.
I said, we create associative memory. And I said, every time you look at that phone, what do you first think of? And he went, oh my God. And I said, look, you don't even have to tell me the word. Just the way that you said it gives me an idea of what you think of when you look at the phone. And he said, yeah, it's terrible. I hate looking at the phone. So I said, let's create a new association with your phone. So in this session, we got him to a point that every time he looked at his phone, he saw gold and opportunities everywhere. And so that changed for him. And at the end of that session, he said to me, if you had the very first session, he said, if you had a guaranteed that you would have gotten rid of my depression, he said, I would have paid $15,000 for that. And he said, I would have gladly paid it because depression cost me well over 10 times that. And, but he said, I never thought that, anyone could guarantee getting rid of it. And he said, in my mind, he said, it now makes sense why the the therapist that I was working with found it so hard to get me out of it because he said, I believed that I would never be out of it. And so he made their job really hard just with that belief. So that's essentially how NLP uses modeling to really get any result that you're prepared to achieve. So you can essentially model anything. Over the years, we used to run wealth clubs, and we used to focus a lot of our attention on how people thought about wealth and how people thought of themselves in context to wealth. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people really won't shift any more than about 15% of who they think they are. So, for example, a person who's not making a lot of money in their lives will have a certain identity and keep showing up as that identity every day. But if they contrast themselves to someone who is incredibly wealthy, like a Richard Branson or, Bill Gates or, anyone who they would think is highly wealthy, they just will see that as such a massive contrast, and they would never see themselves as being anyone like that. So therefore, they will not do the behavior, they will not act like those people, they will not model those people. And so NLP has been very, very useful over the years, to help a lot of people to, get out of depression or, increase their wealth or improve their relationships. And this is why it's so difficult to really explain what NLP is, because everyone comes at it for their own purposeful reason. And I felt that, calling it a modeling system is a really good way to do things. But when you first start with NLP, you learn about how to improve your level of communication. So if a lot of people stop learning NLP at that point, they would say, well, NLP is about improving communication. But those people who go fairly deep into NLP realize that it's a lot more. But I think it would also be really helpful for everyone to also credit where it actually came from, because it didn't just appear. It was actually a modeling assignment in the late 60s by a gentleman called John Grinder, who is an American linguist, and a buddy of his, Richard Bandler, who was an American psychologist. And they got together, and through conversations, they began to realize that, there were some people who were really exceptional at what they did, and there were other people with the same skills, same intellect, same background, but just seemed to be so different to, there were extremes, some at one end and others at the other end. So they asked a really powerful question. They said, so given the fact that you get so many therapists, for example, around the world that all come from similar backgrounds, possess similar intellect, yet produce completely diverse results, how do they do that? So what they found themselves doing was modeling the best of the best in the therapeutic sciences and also within the professional arenas. And they started to find these very common threads. And they began to realize that they could follow these common threads and their worlds would improve quite dramatically. So when you look at John Grinder and Richard Bandler, they became very successful very quickly because they modeled everything that NLP provided. And of course, they called it NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, because they realized that it was almost like a non-touch therapy. You can talk to somebody, and just talking with them using very specific language, you can help that person to change their behavior. So they started to realize there were basic principles that could really change behavior. And here's a classic example. When you close your eyes and you think about a goal you want to achieve, depending on how you see that goal determines whether you get it or whether you don't. For example, when you see yourself in the goal, like you can actually close your eyes and you see your image, something representing yourself in the goal, that's called a disassociative state, meaning that you are disassociated from the result. However, if you see your goal like you are in it, like through your own eyes, you are more likely to get that goal, because that is what is called an associative state. It's like you're fully associated in the goal. And they started to realize that there were these incredible patterns that once you understand how the brain codes and stores concepts, you can really start expanding your realm of reality. And so they found themselves modeling the best of the best. And like in recent days, people like Norman Doige, the Canadian-born psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, he was the guy who wrote the Brain That Changes Itself. So he proved that the brain can actually change. Prior to that, and actually Doige's work was really inspired by the Italian psychiatrist. I think his name was Ernesto Ligaro. I hope I've got that right, but that was back in the early 1900s, and so that
was kind of the foundation of like where neuroplasticity came from.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So they discovered that the brain wasn't hardwired, just like they discovered that the Earth was not flat. And they discovered that we're not limited to our genes, and we're not limited either to our past. And actually, Bruce Lipton, who was the author of Biology Belief, he confirmed that too. He said he's a developmental biologist, and who, like Doige, believed that our brain is not hardwired, but like software that can be upgraded. And it was these sorts of people that really inspired this opportunity where we now all realize that you can become whoever you create yourself to become. And, also whoever you are prepared to become, meaning divorcing whoever you think you are. So this is the area that really excites me, is that the fact that many of us have to let go of our identities, because, the moment we're diagnosed with depression, for example, or anxiety or social anxiety disorder or whatever it might be, we somehow identify with that. And because we identify with that, if you think about how do you do that? How do you identify with something? Well, you lock it in some image of how you see yourself. You lock it in with a feeling that you have in your body. And by the way, it will be in a specific part of your body, not just all over your body. You will lock it in the way that you hear yourself speak. You will lock it in your physiology, how you stand, how you walk, the speed that you walk, how you move your hands, everything. So, and this is what really excited me, particularly in coaching, because the first thing that I'm going to be doing is helping a client, first of all, to understand how they came to this viewpoint of themselves, but secondly, how to let go of that and break these patterns and then reinvent the person. But if a person is not prepared to let go of that, then we've got to work out ways to do that. And this falls into the land of what we call secondary gain. And secondary gain is, like, I've worked with a lot of people with depression over the years. And my biggest challenge at first with the client is getting them out of secondary gain, because some clients actually get a level of significance by being depressed. It's almost like they were completely ignored in their life prior. The moment they get diagnosed with depression, their whole family, all their partners, their friends, people around them walk around on eggshells, and going, "Are you okay? How are you going today? How's the medication working?" And so forth. And they speak in a certain tone, and they start to take an interest in them. So if the person lets go of depression, they equally let go of all that interest. Does that make sense?
It absolutely, yeah. And it's positive reinforcement for a negative behavior. Yeah.
Exactly. So what happens is we lock these things in, and we've got to unlock these things, and we've got to find out how can the person get that level of significance in another way. And once the person buys that, once the person says, "Yep, I would love to get significance that way rather than the other way," now they can let go of that gooey hold that they had on that old identity. And, I get so excited about this. I think that, this NLP to me is this, and it is a science that, it's a complete study of how we become who we are. And it creates an opportunity that I just see a different world. And I just wonder, why doesn't everybody learn this? Actually, Edward de Bono, he was the guy that coined the phrase lateral thinking. And in my view, a genius of creativity and thinking outside of the box. He once said, and don't quote me, but it was something along these lines. He said that if you were limited to learning just one thing, one course, one certificate, one degree, he said, I would choose NLP. And, for a man of that caliber to praise NLP in that particular way is just incredible. Even, I think it was Psychology Today magazine said that NLP is the most powerful tool in existence for behavioral change. And so I guess in summary, if anyone out there is going to learn NLP, here are just some recommendations. There are a lot of great people who teach NLP out there, but in order to help you to find those great people, here are some things to consider. The first thing is make sure that your training includes at least 7 face-to-face days. In other words, live training in a training room, not online. Now, sure, you can learn it online, but if you're going to do that, make sure it's really cheap because you're not fully going to learn NLP online. And you won't learn it in a book either. Sure, intellectually you might understand NLP to a degree, but you really won't know it. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, to know and not to do is not yet to know. And NLP falls in that line so well. You can kind of learn it in a book or online, but you will never really know it unless you do it face to face. And in fact, there's no school anywhere in the world that can actually accredit you if you learn it online. Because they've all recognized that unless technology improves dramatically and we can get the kinesthetic element to it, online just isn't going to cut it. So be sure also that the trainer is accredited, particularly if you want to use it for coaching, as you won't get insurance. No one will insure you if your trainer is not accredited. And I'm not talking about some certificate that they have created themselves. It actually has to be acknowledged by a credible organisation, third party. Like here in Australia, we are accredited by the Australian Board of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and their website, by the way, is www.abnlp.org.au. And so they have a list of all the accredited trainers and what you have to do to be accredited. The other thing is, be sure that your trainer has a level of integrity. NLP is a set of incredibly powerful tools, and it needs to be taught by someone who really does care about you, someone who has your best interests at heart, someone who is going to teach you to use NLP for the benefit of others and yourself, not to the detriment of others. There are some people who teach NLP for the detriment of others, and I think that's completely wrong. Sure, we all have opportunities to do whatever we want on this planet, but I think we owe it to ourselves and to humanity to have a high level of integrity, and we need to respect people. So you'll know whether they fit the integrity line. Just use your own gut there. Typically, you'll pay around $3,000 to $5,000. It does go a little down from there and a little up from there, but that's kind of like the average. For example, we charge around $3,500 for the actual training. That actually gives you a certificate at 3 levels: Ericksonian hypnotherapy, a life coach certificate, and an NLP practitioner certificate, and that's level 1. NLP, by the way, goes into 3 levels. So you'll learn NLP practitioner, which is it's more than an introduction. You actually come out of that training knowing how to use NLP as a coach. You also can use NLP to a fairly great degree. The next level is NLP Masters. So NLP Masters, for anyone out there who is a coach who wants to use it for coaching, I highly recommend you go all the way up to Masters at least. And Masters, people start to really understand what NLP is all about when they learn it at master level. And then the next level is called Trainers Training. We here in Australia, we separate our training into 2 parts. We call it Speaking with Confidence and then Trainers Training, because we get some people who just want to become better speakers. And there's a lot of really good tools for people who want to be quite public, who want to be out there on a stage and, helping to, improve the world, I guess.
Right.
So I wanted to give you guys a fairly full summary of what NLP is and get in there with some case histories. So I hope this is, given you at least a deep level understanding of what it is. But just to go back to the very beginning, NLP is about modeling excellence. That's really what it is. And you'll bring to it whatever you want to bring to it and whatever you want to draw out of it, I guess would be the best summary.
Wow, Rick. So thank you very much for, all that wisdom and just education, I guess, that you brought to us today. I think, I had a list of questions, and if you noticed, I was quiet the whole time. You hit every question I had. I guess there was one question that you kind of touched on that didn't get answered fully, and maybe you did because you kind of talked how NLP is specific and geared towards like behavioral challenges, and I was going to ask, why is this not utilized in therapy more?
Well, the truth of the matter is, it is, we're getting so many more psychiatrists, psychologists, and, all sorts of Reiki healers, you name it.
Right.
We're getting so many people coming into our program now. There was a psychiatrist just recently who came into the program, and she came up to me during one of the breaks, and she said, "Oh my God," she said, "boy, does this open my world." She said, coupled with my training, this just gives me a whole new array and a whole new set of tools. And she said, "I'm so excited to be using this. This makes a lot of sense." So like when NLP first came out, the classrooms were filled with psychiatrists and psychologists. There was a lot of people in that area, which naturally were gravitating to NLP. Then it went into management.
Right.
There are a lot of people learning how to be a better manager, manage their people, their teams in a more efficient way. Then it went into sales. People, realized that there were 4 different ways of communicating with people. By the way, those ways are visual language, auditory language, kinesthetic language, and what we call auditory digital language. That in itself is a Pandora's box of great wisdom.
And that's probably the aspect of it that I'm more familiar with, is that side of it, which is interesting. But regardless, continue.
Yeah, so it is certainly going in there, into the therapies, definitely. I wish that more people would learn it, and not just the therapeutic area. I mean, I've got some people that we've trained that are now taking this into parenting, helping parents to become better with their kids, because we all look at, highly successful people around the world, but in truth, and this is my model of the world, I really believe the people who we really should be investing our time in is the parents. Mothers, teaching them how to train the new leaders of the world to shape their thinking, to help them to feel good about the world and help them to feel good about themselves, and fathers, and I think parenting, learning NLP, and then taking that to teach your kids. We're seeing incredible stuff. We're getting kids of 12 and 14 come into our classes, and oh my God, this new generation of kids really excites me, because they are just really clean spirits. They're just full of enthusiasm, and and they're the leaders of the future.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's very powerful. If I knew an ounce of what I know now 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Actually, that's my next book. I'm writing a book for the teenage market.
Well, that's great. As a father, it's been my journey to try to impart that wisdom and educate as much as I can, and we'll see how it all turns out. But again, Rick, you answered all my questions, and I think this has been fantastic. And like I said, we've had so many guests come on and say NLP was a huge part of their transformation, and we never dive into it. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity, having you back on the show, and giving us kind of this primer of what neuro-linguistic programming is. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Tom. I mean, this, as I shared with you just before we began today, this has been a great catalyst to get me as well.
Thanks for listening to the UpRev Ninja podcast with your host, Tom Hudson. Navigate to our website at uprev.ninja today, where you will find additional resources to help you discover the best version of you. While you're there, join our newsletter and join the discussion on your favorite social media platforms. We've got some excellent guests lined up to share with us how they are becoming the best versions of themselves. Again, thank you for listening. Now it's time to go out and uprev your life.